Every fan dreams of meeting their idol, but what if your idol disappeared so completely that no one, not their family, not their bandmates, not the police, could find them? One vanished in the New Mexico desert with rumors of aliens. Another, a key songwriter for a mega-popular band, checked out of his hotel one day before a huge tour and was never ever seen again. You think you know their music, but you have no idea about their mysteries. 1. Rich E. Edwards of Manic Street Preachers. Let's start with perhaps the most famous vanishing in modern music history. Rich E. Edwards was the brilliant lyricist and rhythm guitarist for the Welsh band Manic Street Preachers. In the mid-90s, the band was on the brink of breaking through in America. They were a huge deal in the United Kingdom, known for their smart, political, and often dark songs, many of which came from Rich E.'s troubled but brilliant mind. He was the poetic soul of the band, a painfully shy man who wrote incredibly powerful lyrics. On February 1, 1995, Rich E. and his bandmate James Dean Bradfield were supposed to fly to the United States for a promotional tour. It was a huge moment for them, but Rich E. never showed up. He had checked out of his hotel in London at 7 in the morning, taking his wallet, keys, and passport with him. For the next 2 weeks, he seemingly drove around, with a few people spotting him here and there. Then his car was found. It was parked at a service station near the Severn Bridge, a location sadly known as a place where many people go to end their troubles. The car battery was dead, and inside were pictures he had taken of his family. But Rich E. was gone. For years, fans and his family held out hope. People claimed to have seen him in India or on remote islands. Was it possible he staged his disappearance to escape the pressures of fame that he so clearly struggled with? He had a history of personal struggles and had spent time in hospitals for his mental health. Did he finally find a way to just slip away from it all and start a new life? Or did he meet a tragic end at that bridge? No one knows for sure. In 2008, after 13 years with no contact, he was legally declared to be presumed gone forever. The mystery of what happened to Rich E. Edwards remains the band's heartbreaking secret. Finding an empty car is a chilling discovery, but what if the vehicle that disappeared was an entire boat lost to the unforgiving sea with a rock star on board? 2. Scott Smith of Loverboy. If you were cranking up the radio in the 1980s, you definitely heard the band Loverboy. Their songs like Working for the Weekend and Turn Me Loose were everywhere. They were a Canadian rock band that hit it big with their catchy tunes and high-energy performances. The man laying down the foundation for their sound was the bassist, Scott Smith. He was a founding member and a key part of their massive success. By the late 90s, the band was still touring and enjoying their legacy as rock royalty. In November of 2000, Scott Smith, an experienced sailor, was on his sailboat with 2 friends off the coast of San Francisco, not far from the Golden Gate Bridge. They were sailing to their next destination when the weather turned nasty. A large wave, reported to be over 25 feet high, tossed one of his friends around. Then another huge wave swept the man overboard into the cold, churning Pacific Ocean. Without a second thought, Scott maneuvered the boat to go back and help his friend. But as he did, another powerful wave hit the boat, and Scott Smith was washed into the sea. His friends immediately threw a life ring and called for help. The Coast Guard launched a massive search, with boats and helicopters scouring the area for hours, then days. But they found nothing. Absolutely no trace of the rock star was ever recovered. He was simply swallowed by the ocean. At 45 years old, a celebrated musician and experienced sailor was gone in an instant. The band was devastated, but eventually decided to continue, saying it's what Scott would have wanted. Disappearing into the endless blue of the ocean is a terrifying thought, but imagine vanishing from the dry, dusty land with no trace at all, leaving behind a car full of your most personal belongings and a mystery that whispers of something not of this world. 3. Jim Sullivan. This next story is one of those that sounds like it was ripped from a science fiction movie. Jim Sullivan was a talented singer-songwriter in the late 1960s and early 1970s. He had a soulful folk rock style and a powerful voice. He hung out with Hollywood actors and was on the verge of making it big. He even released an album in 1969 called UFO, which is a key part of this bizarre story. The album was full of eerie songs about leaving his family behind and being carried away into the desert sky by aliens. In March of 1975, Jim decided to leave his wife and kids in Los Angeles and drive to Nashville, Tennessee to try and kickstart his music career there. He set off alone in his Volkswagen Beetle. He made it as far as Santa Rosa, New Mexico. He checked into a local motel, but the key was later found inside his room, and it appears he never slept there. The next day, his car was found abandoned on a remote desert road about 26 miles away from the motel. Inside the car was his wallet, his beloved guitar, his clothes, and boxes of his unsold records. Everything he owned was there except for him. The police were baffled. They launched a search of the rugged desert landscape, but they found no tracks, no clues, nothing. It was like he had been beamed up from his car. The strange lyrics from his UFO album suddenly seemed like a premonition. Did he just get lost in the desert and succumb to the elements? If so, why was no trace of him ever found? Or did something far stranger happen on that lonely New Mexico road? Did he stage his own disappearance? Or did the strange fantasy he wrote about in his music become a reality? For almost 50 years, the fate of Jim Sullivan has remained one of music's most chilling and otherworldly mysteries. An unexplained desert disappearance is baffling enough, but the next story involves a rock and roll genius who claimed he was communicating with other beings right before his van was found crashed at the bottom of a deep canyon. 4. Philip Tyler Kramer of Iron Butterfly. You've definitely heard the song In-A-Gadda-Da-Vida. It's that epic 17-minute-long psychedelic rock anthem by the band Iron Butterfly. Philip Taylor Kramer, who went by Taylor, played bass in a later version of the band. But his story gets much stranger after his rock and roll days. After leaving music, Taylor proved he was a true genius. He got into engineering and computer science, working on advanced missile guidance systems for the U.S. government, and even starting his own successful tech company. He was working on a way to instantly transmit matter through space, a real-life transporter. On February 12, 1995, just 11 days after Rich E. Edwards vanished, Taylor Kramer made a series of strange phone calls. He called his wife and told her, "I love you more than life itself." Then he called a former bandmate and said, "It's a beautiful world." His last known call was to 911. During the call, he reportedly told the operator that he was going to end his own journey and that he wanted everyone to know that O.J. Simpson was innocent. Then he drove off in his minivan and disappeared. For 4 long years, there was no sign of him. His family and friends were tormented by the mystery. Given his work on secret projects, some wondered if he had been taken by a foreign government. Others, knowing of his recent strange behavior, worried about his mental state. The mystery came to a tragic end in May of 1999. Hikers in a remote canyon near Malibu, California, stumbled upon the wreckage of his minivan at the bottom of a ravine. His skeletal remains were found inside. The authorities concluded that he had likely driven off the cliff on the day he disappeared. But the motive, the strange final calls, and his claims of a major breakthrough in his work left a cloud of mystery that has never fully lifted. He didn't just disappear from the music world, he disappeared from life itself, leaving a puzzle behind. Some musicians disappear from the world physically, but others vanish in a different way, disappearing into their own minds, which is what happened to the original creative force behind one of the biggest bands in history. 5. Syd Barrett of Pink Floyd. Before Pink Floyd became the stadium-filling giants who created The Dark Side of the Moon and The Wall, they were a whimsical, psychedelic pop band led by a brilliant and handsome young man named Syd Barrett. Syd wrote their early hit songs, played lead guitar, and was the band's creative engine. He was a shining star, a true original whose imaginative lyrics and unique guitar playing set the stage for everything that would come. But as the band got more famous, something started to change with Syd. His behavior became increasingly erratic and unpredictable. He was heavily experimenting with substances, which seemed to unlock something dark and unmanageable in his mind. He would go on stage and just stare into space, not playing a single note. He would detune his guitar during a performance or sing the wrong song. His bandmates, who were also his friends, were heartbroken. They tried to help him, but he was slipping away from them. It got to a point where they couldn't rely on him to perform anymore. In 1968, the band made a painful decision. On their way to a gig, they simply decided not to pick him up. Just like that, he was out of the band he had created. He released a couple of solo albums, which were haunting and beautiful, but also showed the fragile state of his mind. Then, he vanished. He left London, moved back to his mother's house in Cambridge, and became a total recluse. He went back to his birth name, Roger Barrett, took up painting and gardening, and completely shut out his past life. He was occasionally spotted by fans, but he was no longer the charismatic rock star. He was a ghost. For over 30 years, he lived in quiet solitude, a man who had disappeared from the world while still living in it, the original crazy diamond who shone too brightly, too quickly. Syd Barrett wasn't the only British guitar hero to be lost to the shadows. Another legend from an equally famous band would follow a similar tragic path. 6. Peter Green of Fleetwood Mac. Long before Fleetwood Mac was the polished, multi-million-selling pop-rock machine of the 1970s, it was a raw, gritty, and incredibly respected British blues band. The heart and soul of that original band was its founder and lead guitarist, Peter Green. He was considered by many, including legends like B.B. King, to be one of the greatest blues guitarists who ever lived. He wrote some of the band's most iconic early songs, including the haunting instrumental Albatross and the classic Black Magic Woman, which was later made a huge hit by Santana. He had a touch and a tone on the guitar that was pure magic. But like Syd Barrett, Peter Green's brilliant mind was also his greatest vulnerability. As the band's fame grew, he became uncomfortable with their wealth. He wanted to give all their money away to charity, which caused a lot of tension within the group. His experimentation with powerful hallucinogens also started to take a heavy toll. The turning point came during a tour in Germany, where he attended a party at a commune and took a massive dose of a substance that seemed to permanently change him. His bandmates said he was never the same after that night. He became withdrawn and unpredictable. His songwriting became darker and more fragmented. Finally, in 1970, he decided he had to leave the band he had formed. He felt that the music industry was a corrupting force. He played his last show and then, for the most part, he vanished from the public eye. He went through years of severe mental health challenges, spending time in hospitals and working low-paying jobs. He was a musical genius who was lost in the wilderness for decades. Though he did eventually make a small comeback in his later years, the brilliant young bluesman who was once hailed as a god on the guitar was gone forever. Another bright star extinguished by a lifestyle that was too much to handle. The psychedelic 60s claimed many great minds, but our next artist's journey into the unknown was perhaps the most frightening of them all. 7. Rock E. Erickson of the 13th Floor Elevators. In the mid-1960s, a band from Texas called the 13th Floor Elevators blasted onto the scene. They were pioneers, often credited as being one of the first true psychedelic rock bands. Their music was a wild, swirling mix of garage rock, blues, and strange, otherworldly sounds, all held together by the electric jug playing of Tommy Hall and the absolutely unique, wailing voice of their frontman, Rocky Erickson. Rocky's voice was a force of nature, a high-pitched scream that could sound both joyful and terrified at the same time. The band's intense lifestyle and open promotion of using mind-altering substances put them directly in the sights of law enforcement in conservative Texas. In 1969, Rocky was arrested for possession of a single joint. Faced with the choice of a long prison sentence or pleading insanity, he chose the latter. It was a decision that would derail his life in the most horrific way. He was sent to a hospital for the criminally insane, a place known for its brutal and experimental treatments. He was subjected to horrible procedures and was locked away with truly dangerous individuals. When he was finally released a few years later, he was a changed man. The vibrant, creative musician was gone, replaced by a frightened and confused person who claimed his body had been taken over by an alien from Mars. For the next 2 decades, Rocky Erickson essentially vanished from the world. He lived in poverty, hoarded mail, and spoke in strange riddles. He was a ghost of his former self, a legend who had been broken by the system. It took the dedicated effort of his brother in the 2000s to help him get the proper care he needed, which led to a miraculous late-in-life comeback. But for 30 years, one of rock's most original voices was completely lost to the world, a casualty of a culture clash he helped to start. While Rocky's story is one of a mind lost, our next musician's tale is about a talent so great it was matched only by the darkness that eventually consumed him from within. 8. Jim Gordon. His name might not be as famous as the rock gods he played with, but if you love classic rock, you have heard Jim Gordon's drumming. He was one of the most in-demand session drummers of his era. He was a member of Derek and the Dominoes with Eric Clapton, and he co-wrote the iconic piano exit to the song Layla. He played on George Harrison's All Things Must Pass. He was the drummer on the Beach Boys' Pet Sounds. His list of credits is a who's who of rock and roll history. He was a phenomenal talent, a drummer with perfect timing and incredible feel. But behind the gold records and the sold-out tours, Jim Gordon was fighting a battle no one could see. He began hearing voices in his head. He believed they were controlling his actions and telling him what to do. He was later diagnosed with a severe mental illness, but at the time, his condition went untreated, hidden behind the chaotic rock and roll lifestyle. His behavior became more and more erratic, and he struggled to keep jobs, even with his incredible talent. The voices grew louder and more demanding. The man who was the beat behind so many happy songs met a horrifyingly tragic turning point. In 1983, in the grip of his illness, he committed a terrible, violent act against his own mother. He was arrested and finally received the diagnosis that explained his torment, but it was too late. He was sent to a medical and psychiatric prison where he remained for the rest of his life, passing away in 2023. While he didn't physically vanish in the same way as others on this list, the brilliant, gentle, and talented musician that the world knew in the 1970s did disappear. He was lost to a devastating illness, a chilling reminder that some of the deepest mysteries are the ones that reside inside the human mind. The story of a brilliant mind's descent is heartbreaking. And sadly, it's a story that repeated itself with another founding member of a legendary West Coast band. 9. Skip Spence of Moby Grape. In the vibrant San Francisco music scene of 1966, a band called Moby Grape was formed, and they were supposed to be the next big thing. They had 5 talented singer-songwriters, tight harmonies, and a unique sound that blended folk, rock, and country. One of their founding members and a key creative force was a Canadian-born musician named Skip Spence. He was the original drummer for another legendary band, Jefferson Airplane, before he picked up a guitar to help form Moby Grape. He was a charismatic, energetic performer and a gifted, if unconventional, songwriter. The band's record label made a huge mistake by releasing 5 singles from their debut album all on the same day. The move backfired, overwhelming radio stations and confusing the public. It was a marketing disaster that the band never fully recovered from. This, combined with the pressures of the rock lifestyle, began to take a toll on Skip Spence. Like so many others from that era, his heavy use of mind-altering substances began to unlock a darker side of his personality. The breaking point came during the recording of their second album in New York City. In a state of paranoia, Skip had a breakdown. He took a fire axe and tried to break down a hotel room door to confront one of his bandmates. The police were called, and he was arrested and institutionalized. After his release, he was a different person. He recorded a solo album called Ore, a strange, haunting, and brilliant record that has since become a cult classic. But after that, he essentially vanished. He drifted in and out of homelessness and suffered from severe mental health issues for the rest of his life. The incredible talent that helped launch 2 iconic bands was gone, another victim of too much, too soon. A story of a musician losing his way is sadly common. But what about a musician who becomes a ghost, intentionally hiding from the world and tormenting his fans with rumors and mystery? 10. Vinnie Vincent. In the world of 1980s hard rock, the band Kiss was a titan. After they took off their iconic makeup, they needed a new guitarist to replace Ace Frehley. The man they chose was Vinnie Cusano, who they rechristened as Vinnie Vincent, the Ankh Warrior. He was a shredding, flashy guitarist who brought a new, heavier sound to the band for their multi-platinum album, Lick It Up. He was a co-writer on most of the album's hits and seemed destined for superstardom. But Vinnie's time in Kiss was rocky. There were clashes over his role, his contract, and his wild guitar solos that often went on for way too long. After just 1 album and tour, he was out of the band. He then formed his own group, the Vinnie Vincent Invasion, which had some success. But after 2 albums, that band also fell apart amidst more arguments and turmoil. And then Vinnie Vincent just disappeared. For more than 20 years, he became a rock and roll ghost. He almost never appeared in public. Rumors swirled. Had he changed his appearance? Was he living under a new name? Lawsuits from former bandmates and record companies piled up. He would occasionally surface, announcing a new project that never happened, or giving a rare interview before retreating back into the shadows. Fans became obsessed with finding him. His vanishing act made him more legendary than his music ever did. In recent years, he has made a few bizarre appearances at fan conventions, but he remains a deeply strange and reclusive figure. He didn't vanish in the desert or at sea. He vanished in plain sight, becoming one of heavy metal's most enduring and frustrating enigmas. Some musicians run from the spotlight, but what about a rock star who simply walked away from the biggest band in the world without a word, choosing a quiet life over chaos? 11. Rico Savage. John Deacon chose to leave the biggest band in the world for a life of peace and quiet. But what about a musician who was so mysterious, so deep in the heavy metal underground that some people still argue about whether he was ever real to begin with? This is the strange, phantom-like tale of Rico Savage. In the 1980s, long before the internet, the heavy metal scene had a thriving underground network of fans who would trade cassette tapes of obscure and unsigned bands. It was through this tape-trading world that the legend of Rico Savage was born. The story goes that Rico was a brilliant but troubled guitarist from Florida. He recorded a demo tape of blistering, raw, and incredibly talented heavy metal. The music was supposedly amazing, far ahead of its time. But the story attached to the tape was even more compelling. Legend says that Rico was a deeply disturbed individual who, after recording his masterpiece, did something terrible to his family before vanishing off the face of the earth. The demo tape was his only legacy, a piece of haunted rock and roll history passed from fan to fan. For decades, metalheads have searched for this tape and for any proof that Rico Savage actually existed. No one has ever found a confirmed copy of the music. No official records, no photos, and no family members have ever surfaced. Was he a real person whose tragic story was lost to time? Or was he a complete fabrication? A heavy metal ghost story created by tape traders to make a particular demo seem more special and legendary. The line between fact and fiction has blurred completely, leaving Rico Savage as the ultimate heavy metal enigma, a musician who may have never been, and was therefore never seen again. The legend of Rico Savage is a ghost story told by metal fans, but our next tale is about a real woman, a pioneer at the heart of the New York punk scene, who was on the verge of stardom before she walked out of a rehearsal and into absolute oblivion. 12. Carrie Lee. In the gritty, creative cauldron of New York City in the mid-1970s, the punk rock scene was just beginning to explode. At the very center of this new movement was a band called the Stilettos. They were a raw, theatrical, all-female fronted group that was a major attraction at legendary clubs like CBGB. The band featured a young singer who would later become a global superstar, Debbie Harry of the band Blondie. But alongside her was another powerful and charismatic singer, Carrie Lee. By all accounts, Carrie was a huge talent and a magnetic presence on stage. The Stilettos were a chaotic and constantly changing group, with members coming and going. After some changes, Carrie Lee became part of a new version of the band, alongside future members of other famous groups. They were rehearsing, writing songs, and seemed to be on the cusp of making a real impact on the music world. She was right there at the birth of a movement, a key player in a scene that would change music forever. Then one day in 1978, she simply vanished. The stories from her former bandmates are all consistent. She left a rehearsal one evening and was never heard from or seen by any of them ever again. There was no fight, no dramatic exit. She just walked out the door and into thin air. Did she decide to leave the music business behind and start a new life? Did she run into trouble on the tough streets of New York City? No one knows. In an era before cell phones and the internet, a person could truly fall off the map. All that is left of Carrie Lee are a few old photos, some mentions in rock history books, and a deep unanswered question. She is a ghost of the punk rock scene, a reminder of a talent that disappeared before the world even got a chance to know her name. Vanishing from the city streets is a chilling thought, but the mystery only deepens when a rock star is found. But the circumstances are so bizarre and frightening that the truth of what happened to him vanished forever. 13. Bob E. Fuller. You have definitely heard the song "I Fought the Law." It is a classic rock and roll anthem of rebellion, a garage rock masterpiece that has been covered by countless punk and hard rock bands. The man who made that song a huge hit was a talented singer and guitarist from Texas named Bobby Fuller. He had a great voice, movie star good looks, and a tight, energetic band called the Bobby Fuller Four. In 1966, they were on top of the world. Their hit song was climbing the charts, and they were becoming major stars. On July 18, 1966, just a few months after his song became a smash hit, Bobby Fuller was found inside his car, which was parked outside his Hollywood apartment. But the scene was incredibly strange and disturbing. His body was in a terrible state, and it appeared he had been forced to consume gasoline. The police, almost immediately, ruled his passing a result of his own actions. But absolutely no one who knew him believed it. He was not known to be down or unhappy. In fact, he was celebrating his success. The theories began to swirl immediately and have never stopped. His band had connections to people in organized crime. Was he trying to get out of a bad deal? Was he silenced because he knew too much? The details of the scene just did not add up. The official story felt like a cover-up. It was as if the truth of what really happened to Bobby Fuller in his final hours was intentionally erased. Though his body was found, the man his friends and family knew, the happy and successful rock star, had vanished into one of Hollywood's darkest and most enduring mysteries. The truth of who was responsible for his fate was never seen again. The mystery of a final few hours is haunting, but what happens when the disappearance lasts for years and takes place not in Hollywood, but in the middle of a dangerous war zone?